Hi, about 5 months ago, I filed a request under the Freedom of Information Act with the U.S. Department of Justice. I made a request for information about the arrest and prosecution of one of the nation's leading LGBT activists, Lieutenant Daniel Choi. The work of Lieutenant Choi and other activists, including members of the group Get Equal, was responsible for building public pressure to overturn the military's discriminatory policy known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Because of his highly visible activism, Lieutenant Choi became the target, first for military discharge after he became openly gay, and then for vindictive prosecution because of his activism. Because there are many serious questions about the government's case against Lieutenant Choi, I posted information about this on my blog. Last March, I blogged about Lieutenant Choi's trial. I sent an email to Angela George, the prosecutor in the case, requesting information so that I could update my blog. After my emails to the prosecutor went unanswered, I submitted a formal request under the Freedom of Information Act. A DOJ employee named Sanjay Sola, who I believe is pictured here, has stopped providing me with updates on my FOIA request. Among the requests I made to the Department of Justice to find out how they decide whether to prosecute activists, I requested information about the approvals that the Department of Justice seeks in order to bring such cases. I also asked for limits, rules, procedures, or other guidelines that must be used or taken into consideration before prosecuting activists in order to minimize the interference with First Amendment rights, other constitutional rights, civil liberties, and other civil rights of activists. I also asked if there were any restrictions that the Department of Justice must adhere to before they bring cases against activists. And one of the other requests I made was to find out whether agencies other than the Department of Justice are involved in deciding when to prosecute activists. Lieutenant Choi was only fighting for equality and justice, yet the government uses resources to prosecute him that it does not use, for example, to prosecute financial companies who perpetrated mortgage fraud during the financial crisis. Why is the government interested in a vindictive prosecution against Lieutenant Choi? I don't know. That's a very good question. That's why I submitted my FOIA request. I need your help to find out, because there seems to be a pattern of activists being targeted for prosecution under the Obama administration. Aaron Swartz, an advocate for free information on the internet, was hounded for about 2 years by federal prosecutors until he committed suicide. Chelsea Manning faced torture and an unfair trial after she exposed U.S. war crimes. After Antonio Davis took part in a peaceful protest, federal prosecutors discriminated against him based on some of the medications he took. For unexplained reasons, federal prosecutors have been targeting several peace activists in the Midwest. The purpose of the Department of Justice is not to target activists who may be engaged in exerting pressure politics against a sitting president in order to bring about social change. It seems that the false intentions and mixed motivations of targeting activists for vindictive prosecution would have to come from outside the Department of Justice. Several executive government agencies and possibly outside groups were involved in the decision-making to arrest and prosecute Lieutenant Choi for his activism. When it comes to cases involving the First Amendment, whether it be an activist's right to freedom of speech or freedom of assembly, or perhaps the media's right to a free press, why is there reason to suspect the motivations of prosecutors like Angela George with the Department of Justice? The prosecutor in Lieutenant Choi's case, Angela George, reports to Ronald Machen, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Mr. Machen was appointed by Eric Holder, the U.S. Attorney General, to violate the First Amendment rights of reporters as part of the Obama administration's crackdown on government whistleblowers. Because activists are only trying to bring about reforms, that work may be politically embarrassing to a president who is resisting social change, like it seems President Obama is doing. The only way for us to know what is motivating prosecutors to bring forward vindictive cases would be for the Department of Justice to honor the request made under the Freedom of Information Act. When he took office in 2009, President Obama issued instructions to government agencies to make information available. It didn't take long, though, for the Obama administration to violate its promises of transparency and openness. How you can help Lieutenant Choi and other activists is to ask the government to release information about how they determine when they bring forward vindictive prosecution of activists. Send an email to angela.george@usdoj.gov. Call Sanjay Sola at 202-252-6038. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, for me as a blogger, due process, freedom of information, these are all rights that we enjoy as Americans. They should not exist as ideas or concepts. They should exist in reality. The Department of Justice should not allow the false intentions or mixed motivations of outside forces to determine when it brings forward prosecutions, especially of activists. Unless, of course, President Obama has managed to politicize the Department of Justice.